Top reasons that people leave Alaska. My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm a realtor in South Central Alaska with Keller Williams, and my mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching you in real estate. And today, what I'm going to be doing is really talking about the reasons that people leave Alaska. So it shouldn't be any surprise to people that there are a number of people who do move up here to Alaska, up here for a couple of years and decide it's not for them, and they decide to move on. So, according to the Alaska Trends magazine, which I do cite pretty regularly on this channel, we actually have seen, I think it's from 54,000 people, we've had a net loss since the early 2010s. So we are seeing kind of I'm not going to say an exodus, but we are seeing kind of a loss of people on a regular basis. And so what are the reasons that people decide to leave Alaska? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Before we get started, though, do make sure you give this video a like and make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already. And let's go and jump into today's video. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, we are seeing a drop in population every year. And really, the magazine does a really good job in kind of breaking down some of the reasons for that. One of the big ones is just that we have fewer and fewer kids being born in the lower 48. So there's fewer and fewer people in families that are moving up here. So yes, we have less people that are moving in, but adults are still moving out. Whereas normally we would have had bigger families moving up in past decades. So that's number one. Secondly, it's really interesting as they say, hey, so we kind of break this down by age grouping and we see where the biggest disparities are, and really the biggest drops that they've seen, and this really surprised me, but it's from, I think it's like 30 to 40, that's where we're seeing a drop where it went from about 65% of the people in this group stayed for 5 years or longer, and now we're sitting at about 57% of people in this age group are staying 5 years or longer. So we're seeing fewer and fewer people stay for longer periods of time. So that's significant. Another thing that really stood out to me is that women actually did have more of a tendency to stay longer than men do. Now, this really it might have just been in the age group I was looking at, but that did just kind of smack in the face of what conventional wisdom says, because the headlines always say Alaska is this really dangerous place for women. Don't go there. You're going to get murdered. And the data from what we're seeing is that women actually do tend to stay in Alaska for a longer period of time than men do. Now, I'm sure there's all sorts of underlying reasons, and I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that a really dedicated statistician and researcher could really pull back the layers and find out, but that's just kind of an interesting observation that I saw in the data. Now, one other thing I do want to mention before we go too much further is because there has been a 53,000 population deficit from 2012 up to the current time, what that means is there are a lot of job openings from what we've had before, because we still have these basic services, we still have all this stuff where we need to keep it staffed, and people are leaving the state. So they might not be the specific job that you're really trained to do, but there's a good chance you're going to be able to find some kind of a position up here. You just have to get over the hurdle of them hiring somebody who's out of state, but you pick the right company, you make sure you've got the right references, and do the stuff that I've discussed in other videos, and you can really increase your chances. But that's kind of the stats. Now let's talk about what some of the reasons are for those people who are leaving, for why it is that they're leaving. I'd say probably one of the biggest ones right off the bat is just there are going to be fewer job opportunities here from what we're going to experience in other parts of the country. I've already said in other videos that there's kind of less of a white collar kind of a workforce here. If you're looking for something that's more like a middle class corporate America, those jobs exist up here. They're not really going to be particularly plentiful. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit more of that flavor, then Alaska might be kind of tough. And then your opportunity to promote up the ladder, it can be a little diminished too, just because you are playing in a much smaller pond. And your opportunities for advancement up the ladder, you can go up the ladder pretty quick, but you can also hit the ceiling pretty quick here as well. So just something to keep in mind. Every industry is going to be different. So for some people, it's a great, it's a great option to just jump in and play in the smaller pool and be the biggest fish really quickly and kind of get that leadership experience as fast as you can. For others, it might not benefit you nearly as well. So you just have to know what industry it is that you're in. Another reason that I've noticed that people do decide to leave is they just don't really like the sense of being isolated from the rest of the lower 48. I've said it quite a bit. I know other people have said it quite a bit, but when you live in Alaska, you can definitely feel like you're living in another country just because we're not, technically we're linked to the United States by Canada, by the Alaska-Canadian Highway, ALCAN, but it doesn't really feel like we're connected because it takes us so long to drive, and it certainly takes us a long time to fly to get anywhere to the lower 48 or to the rest of the continental U.S. So for that reason, you can definitely feel like you're isolated, and for some people, that's all fine and good. For other people, where staying connected with their family back home, you can see it. You can definitely see this conflicting desires in people when I'm talking to them, because they want to be close to family, but they also want the adventure and they want the lifestyle and everything else that the state has to offer. So, ultimately there is a balance to be struck, and some people do it just fine. Other people decide, hey, that balance means I need to be a little bit closer to home, and I might have to just get some kind of a secondary property, a secondary home up here in Alaska, or I'll just come up and visit once a year. I'll be happy with that too. But really the important thing is just making sure you strike that balance, whatever it looks like. The next reason definitely shouldn't be a surprise, and that is the winters are long, they are dark, and they are cold. Okay, that's probably one of the biggest reasons that people do decide to eventually leave, and they'll go somewhere like Arizona or Florida or Texas or somewhere where it's really hot, just to, purge the memory of all the long, cold, dark winters. So that's one of the biggest reasons that people do leave, and it's not just for the cold and the discomfort of going from the car and all that. You can seriously get some seasonal depression just from all the darkness, some seasonal mental disorder, if I recall correctly. Don't slaughter me in the comment section if I'm completely butchering all the terms, but that can definitely be something that can weigh heavy on you. It's something that I've dealt with just living up here over the years. And the thing that can be kind of rough is, I've got real estate, I stay really busy with that. And then this thing comes around, every couple months during the winter time, and there's no excuse. I still have to keep up. I still have to function, still have to do all this stuff. And you still kind of have that extra added weight onto my shoulder as we're doing it. Now, I will say not everybody gets impacted by the seasonal depression to the same extent. For me, it does impact me. It's not debilitating. It does make it kind of feels like I have weights tied to my feet. Honestly, it's kind of how it feels sometimes, but it's doable. Other people, it can be really debilitating. Other people, you wouldn't know it was winter by looking at them, other than them just looking a little bit more pale. It just doesn't impact them. So you're really not going to know how you're going to be impacted by the environment and by the winter time until you actually get up here and experience it. But let's go and take a break real quick. For those who've been watching for a bit, you know that I offer a free relocation guide for those of you who are considering moving to Alaska. If that's something that would benefit you, go to the description section down below. Make sure you go to the website, register, and then you put relocation guide in the little comment section so I know what to send you. And also, while you're looking further into moving to Alaska, do make sure you go check out the Alaskan Journey podcast. Link for that, again, is going to be in the description section. And in that podcast, I actually interview a lot of people who have recently moved up here to Alaska and talk about their experiences of living here and what it's like moving here. So make sure you go take advantage of that. Now, let's go and finish today's video. Now, one thing that I haven't mentioned that's very important is we do have a lot of people leaving, but a lot of them are military. So obviously, you're not going to come up here with the military and be here for 20 years still being in the military. They're going to go station you, give you PCS orders somewhere else. So that's part of it. FOMO, fear of missing out with what's going on in the lower 48. That's another reason that I do see people leaving as well. And for some people, that's important. They don't want to feel like they're missing out what's going on in big cities in the lower 48, and that's perfectly fine. And last but not least, what I'm going to say on here is that if you decide, then it's going to be terrible. And those people usually end up moving. Now, I say that because sometimes we'll have a couple that moves up here. One really loves it. The other one's decided from the very beginning that they're going to hate it. And then after that, it's just a matter of time till eventually they end up leaving. Now, I can certainly understand the mentality of it. I mean, I really can. If Alaska is not really your cup of tea, then you need to have that conversation. What I would just say, though, is if you've decided Alaska is awful from the very beginning and you're not going to give it a shot, then Alaska is going to be awful and you're not going to have any fun and you're just going to be miserable the entire time. So even if it's not your favorite, I would say at least get out, enjoy it as best you can, and take advantage of it, because this is one of the most unique places in the entire U.S. to live. So I sure hope this has been useful for you. Make sure, again, you give this video a like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.